Very few people had a front row seat to the 20th century, quite like Singapore's founding father, Lee Kuan Yew. This is a man who went from being a subject of the British Empire to a world leader who advised presidents and prime ministers. And from that incredible vantage point, he delivered a fascinating and frankly absolutely brutal postmortem on the decline of Great Britain. So that's what we're going to unpack here. So let's start at the beginning. The year is 1946. A young Lee Kuan Yew shows up in London. The city's scarred by bombs, sure, but it's defiant. And he is just in awe. He sees this society that's, it's clean, it's courteous, everything just works. He tells this amazing story about seeing a newspaper stand with no one even there, just a box for the money, and people would just take a paper and leave the right change. It was that profound sense of trust and order that made him think, wow, this is a truly civilized people. Okay, now fast forward 50 years. That awe, that admiration, it's completely curdled into this damning verdict. The same man, looking at the very same city, sees something totally unrecognizable. In his eyes, that civilized society he once looked up to was just gone. So what on earth happened? How does a nation go from being a model of civilization to a cesspool of decay in a single person's lifetime? That's the huge question that Lee Kuan Yew really grappled with, and it's exactly what we're going to get into. First, we've got to really understand the stark contrast he was seeing. Because to him, these weren't just two different eras, they were like two completely different countries. And his breakdown of the change is just wow. On one hand, you have the Britain of the 40s. He saw it as homogenous, super self-confident, and totally united in rebuilding after the war. But the Britain of the 90s, he saw a society defined by, in his words, yobs and football hooligans, a place where you were actually afraid to ride the tube at night. Just a complete shattering of that original social fabric. So what was the culprit? What caused all this? Well, according to Lee, the root of the problem was something that, ironically, he had really admired at first. He came to call it the poison of welfare. As a student, Lee himself actually benefited from the brand new National Health Service. He remembers getting a pair of glasses, totally free, just by signing a form. And at the time, he thought it was genius, a truly civilized society taking care of its own. He had no idea he was watching the planting of a seed that he believed would one day lead to Britain's undoing. But then, with decades of hindsight, and after building his own nation from basically nothing, his entire perspective flipped. He came to the conclusion that this cosseted life, this incredible safety net, had an unintended and completely devastating side effect. It slowly, but surely, killed the very spirit of enterprise that had made Britain great in the first place. He saw this really clear chain reaction. First, the welfare state gets bigger and bigger, making life more secure for everyone. But that security, he argued, removes the incentive, that fire in the belly for people to strive, to take big risks, to work incredibly hard. And the end result? Wealth creation slows down, which eventually threatens the whole system. Now, this economic stagnation, it didn't just happen in a bubble. In Lee's view, it forced Britain's hand, and it led directly to the next phase of his diagnosis, a whole new set of problems that were all about division. He basically saw Britain as being caught in a trap. Think about it. You've got a shrinking workforce, falling birth rates, and the ballooning costs of an aging population that depends on welfare. The country needed more people, a lot more people, to keep the economy afloat and to pay for it all. And the only solution, he argued, was mass immigration. But this, right here, was the fatal flaw, according to Lee. The problem wasn't immigration itself, the problem was the complete and utter lack of a plan for integration. He believed Britain's leaders just imported labor as a quick economic fix, without ever thinking about the massive, monumental task of forging a new, unified national identity out of all these different peoples. And the consequences he saw were really twofold. On the one hand, you had what he called a polyglot community, where different groups lived side by side but separately, and that sense of national cohesion he so admired in the 40s just evaporated. And on the other hand, you had a brain drain, where Britain's best and brightest, like its top doctors, were packing up and leaving for places like America, forcing the UK to hire foreign doctors just to keep its hospitals running. Now, of course, there was a major attempt to reverse all this. But in Lee's analysis, not even the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher, could fix what was already so deeply broken.
Lee actually believed that Thatcher correctly identified the problem. She knew she had to restore individual incentives and that spirit of risk-taking. But his conclusion was that her efforts were ultimately just too little, too late. The culture of dependency was just too deeply baked into the national psyche after decades.
And this quote, man, this gets right to the heart of his political realism. Lee argued that in a democracy, once you give the population a free benefit, like healthcare, it becomes a sacred birthright. Any politician who even tries to take it away, they'll get crushed in the next election. The system basically creates a one-way street toward more spending and more dependency. And all of this, it led to Lee's final and honestly pretty chilling verdict on the future of Britain and really much of Europe. I mean, just look at the scorecard. The result was two nations on completely different paths. By the end of his life, Lee's Singapore, the former colony, was twice as wealthy per person as the UK, had a homicide rate 10 times lower, and had incredible political stability. The student had, by almost every measure, surpassed the master by following a totally different playbook. And if you want a modern-day symbol of the exact problems Lee was diagnosing decades ago, look no further. Over 7 million people are currently stuck on NHS waiting lists. It's a concrete manifestation of a system that he believed was collapsing under the weight of its own promises. He saw a political cycle that just kept the decline going. To get elected, politicians have to promise more and more benefits, more for healthcare, for pensions, for unemployment, but they can't ask for the necessary sacrifices in taxes to pay for it. So what do? They borrow. In his words, they're mortgaging the future to win today's vote. And this was his final, devastating prediction from his very last book. He believed this comfortable world was completely unsustainable, and that eventually, reality, external forces, would come knocking. And when that happened, a new, much tougher social contract would have to be negotiated, whether people liked it or not. And that leaves us with Lee Kuan Yew's ultimate warning, which is really a question for all of us. Can a country ever turn back from a path of decline once its people have become addicted to the system that's causing it? He laid out this incredibly powerful case for how a nation's greatest strengths can curdle into its most profound weaknesses. And the question he leaves behind is whether, once that process starts, there is any way back